There's something about the smell of grilled corn and the clink of ice in a glass of cold lemonade that still reminds me of last summer. The last summer I felt so strongly that I didn't belong. Laughter and chatter echoed around the Brooks' backyard, but I stood silently in the corner, an unnoticed ghost. The annual Brooks family barbecue is a staple in this Raleigh suburb. Despite the meticulous planning and impeccable exterior, there are cracks beneath the surface that no one wants to admit. These parties are more than just a chance to eat and drink. They're a stage for the family too. Family members play their part. Each person plays a part assigned to them. I, Evelyn, 13, have tried many times to fit in. Right now, I am trying to help my mother prepare corn on the cob for the party. The corn is piled up, wrapped in foil, waiting to be roasted over a blazing charcoal fire. I carefully pick each ear, wash it, and place it on a tray. But when I hand the corn to my mother, Helen, who is always meticulous about details, scowls and mutters that I am doing it wrong. "Evelyn, you're ruining everything," Mom said, her voice as sharp as thorns. "Let me make it right." My hands felt numb, and instead of continuing, I withdrew. My small efforts were often ignored or even criticized. Meanwhile, my 6-year-old sister, Marissa, received admiring glances without even trying. Amidst the soft music blaring from the speakers outside, Marissa sang a song she had learned in kindergarten. Everyone applauded, especially Helen, my mother, whose eyes were bright and proud. It was then that I realized the invisible distance between us had long been carved out. Aunt Shirley, my mother's older sister, was the only one who gently approached me and placed her hand on my shoulder, as if to comfort. "You did well, Evelyn," she said softly, but her voice was warm. It was a rare encouragement that made me feel acknowledged. But even with her there, I just stood there, huddled by my bedroom window, listening to the laughter and chatter from the backyard. The air was filled with the fragrant smell of roasted corn, grass, and citronella candles lit around the yard to ward off mosquitoes. Twinkling yellow lights hung from the branches of the old oak trees, swaying in the gentle breeze. A glass of sweet tea was placed on the table, along with the sound of ice cubes clinking together, creating the background music for the party. But amidst the warmth, I still felt cold like an outsider. Helen's voice rang out like an arrow piercing straight into my heart. "Evelyn, you ruined the whole roast. Why don't you listen to me for once?" Peter, my father, just stood silently by the stove, looking at me with a puzzled expression, but saying nothing. His eyes were probably trying to hide his disappointment and confusion. I didn't even dare to look back. I just bowed my head, feeling heavy inside. I knew I was just a kid struggling for recognition, but every word like this made me more determined. That night, when everyone had gone home, I sat at my desk, lit a small lamp, and picked up a pen to write in my diary. "One day, I will make them see me for who I really am," I wrote, my handwriting shaky but determined. "Even if I have to leave to do it." I closed the diary, looked out the window of the small room where the lights of the neighborhood. The lights were still on. The laughter from the party was still ringing, but this time, I didn't feel like I belonged there anymore. I was ready for a different start, one where I wasn't clouded by the shadows of bias and expectations. The holidays, in my house, were never simply a day of rest or cozy gatherings. To me, they always felt like a dress rehearsal for a big play, one in which I was never cast. The bright yellow light from the crystal chandelier in the Brooks dining room only served to highlight the distance between me and my family. That feeling has never left me since that summer barbecue. The way my mother, Helen, kept talking about my sister Marissa's accomplishments and milestones, as if she were the center of the universe. And I, Evelyn, was like a shadow standing on the sidelines, my voice pushed aside. The long table was set with traditional Southern fare, crispy turkey, grilled to perfection with a deep cranberry sauce, buttery mashed potatoes, golden toast, and a side of rich greens. The cozy atmosphere accentuated the coldness I sensed from the eyes of the people around me. Marissa, with her bright smile and bubbly voice, was the center of the conversation. She was talking excitedly about the art exhibit she had just entered at school, her watercolors proudly displayed. My mother, Helen, was nodding and beaming, clearly proud. I tried to interject about an academic award I had received last month. "Mom, I just got an award for outstanding student in science," I began, my voice a little shaky but hopeful. But before she could finish, a soft laugh rang out, and my mother interrupted. "Evelyn is smart, but she's not the public type." That was followed by a burst of awkward laughter around the table. A few of the uncles and their wives smiled awkwardly, not knowing how to react. The feeling of rejection and alienation surged through me like a cold autumn wind. I stood up and asked permission to go out onto the porch, where an old wooden swing swayed in the wind. Sitting there, I gazed at the clear, cold, yet clear November sky. The dim moonlight cast shadows on the fallen, dry yellow leaves. Not long after, Aunt Shirley gently walked out, sat next to me, and whispered, "It won't always be like this, honey." Her voice carried comfort and hope, but my heart was still filled with doubts. I remember the neighborhood potlucks where people brought food. Homemade, shared with each other with sincerity. Here, in the familiar dining room, the atmosphere is not the same. It carries the weight of expectations, discrimination, and unspoken stories. The soft chatter, the clink of knives and forks on plates, the aroma of pumpkin pie and roasted sweet potatoes all combined to create a symphony of holiday cheer. But I felt like an uninvited guest in my own home. The swing swayed gently, and I wondered how long it would take for me to become someone my family could not only see but be proud of. Would it be only when I was gone that they would truly realize my worth? That night, when I returned to my room, the diary was open again. Everything was quiet, except for the pent-up thoughts that I didn't know when would be released. I wrote a short sentence, but it contained a lot of longing. With each passing Thanksgiving, I realize more clearly that I need to find my own path, where I am not a supporting character in someone else's story. Sometimes freedom looks like a one-way bus ticket, not freedom, but packing all you can carry in an old suitcase. Crushed. That's the feeling I get late at night, when all around me is darkness and distant noises. My small bedroom was still cluttered with books, unfolded clothes, and fragments of memory scattered across my desk. Marissa's laughter echoed down the hall, a reminder of the place I once called home, a place I never really felt like I belonged. I sat there, pen in hand, intently filling out applications to the college I had long dreamed of, a school far away from Raleigh, where I could start over, build a new self, unconstrained by my family's prejudices and expectations. A short time later, my mother, Helen, entered the room with a cold look in her eyes. "You're running away from home," she said, her voice tinged with sadness and anger. "It's not where you're going. It's that you refuse to face reality." Peter, my father, stood silently by the door, not saying a word. His eyes were full of emotion, like someone watching from afar, unable or unwilling to intervene. I knew what he wanted to say, but he chose to remain silent. Marissa, the younger sister, giggled mischievously from the next room. "Evelyn will miss her, that's for sure." Her words were like an arrow, both sarcastic and curious. After weeks of anxiety and preparation, I received a letter saying that I had been accepted to the university of my choice. The good news came, but my heart was still heavy. Helen received the news, but her reaction was only a nonchalant nod, as if my achievements were of no value to her. Aunt Shirley, the only person who has always stood by me, sent a greeting card with the line, handwriting, "Don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't be." That simple message became a flame of hope in me. The morning I left, Everything was quick and quiet. Helen barely said goodbye, just a few hasty, general instructions. Peter held me tight, his eyes warm but his words hushed. Marissa just shrugged, a smile flickering through her confusion. Aunt Shirley, like a last resort, silently placed some cash and a card with an old family recipe in my bag, a wordless gift that meant so much. On the old bus, I looked back at the familiar house gradually disappearing into the mist. My heart felt like it had two opposite halves, one relieved to be free, and the other burdened by memories and unhealed wounds. I know the journey ahead won't be easy, but it's the path I've chosen, the path to assert myself, to prove that even if I'm rejected, I'm still valuable and worthy of respect. My first semester in Raleigh was filled with quick ramen meals, late nights. Waking up late to do laundry, and the silence, a quiet that is both lonely and healing. Every time I hear the wind whistling through the maple trees outside my dorm window, I am reminded of home, seemingly small things that haunt my mind. The sound of my mother calling me over the phone, the way Marissa talked to Aunt Shirley over the phone, the smells of corn and pumpkin pie still lingered in my mind. I tried to find a sense of belonging in my new life, in the noisy city with the sound of cars, the sound of hurried footsteps, the laughter in the crowded cafeteria. My freshman dorm wasn't big. My room was tiny with a bunk bed and a desk overflowing with books. My roommate Tina, from Charlotte, was the first person I really connected with. She was non-judgmental, sharing her life stories and giving me advice on how to navigate the first few days away from home. Tina always said that college was a place to learn, not just from books, but from the people around you. She introduced me to Valerie Hines, a senior who became a valuable mentor and companion. Valerie was the kind of warm, approachable person with the kind of tactful advice and patience I never had in my own family. I tried to fit in with student clubs, from literature clubs to volunteer groups, but often failed. I felt like an outsider. Life, just like I used to feel at family parties. The rejections and not being listened to made me want to give up, but the comfort of the school library helped me calm down. In those moments, I found a place to be myself without having to try to be better than anyone else. Calls home were often awkward. Helen kept a cool distance, asking only the necessary questions and then ending quickly. Marissa hardly called, or when she did, it was only a polite hello over the phone. The feeling of abandonment lingered, but I knew I had to move on. My little dream started to show signs of coming true when I won I wrote an essay about a girl's journey to find her voice in the world, and I received high praise from the judges. When I called my mother to tell her, all I got in response was a reminder to send money home for Thanksgiving, a neutral but not surprising response. But Valerie, with her bright eyes and genuine smile, invited me to her family's Thanksgiving. It was a simple invitation, but it carried a warmth and acceptance I had never known. It was the first time I felt I wasn't alone, that there was a place I could call home, even if it wasn't my birth home. College life was a roller coaster of early days. I learned how to organize my life on my own, from thrift store shopping to preparing simple meals to tailgating before football games. These small, simple routines provided the comfort and freedom I craved. I realized that freedom is not just about leaving a home, but also the ability to build a new home in your own heart. There is a heartache in watching someone you love fade away, even when you saw it coming all along. I still remember my mother saying, "Marissa just needs time," as a way to deny the obvious truth that is happening before our eyes. Raleigh winters were bitterly cold, and holiday lights strung across the neighborhood, their shimmering light casting deeper shadows than warmth. That Christmas, while everyone else was preparing for the perfect party, my Brooks family was consumed with unadmitted tensions. My sister Marissa arrived late for family dinner. She came in smelling of alcohol, adding to the already tense atmosphere. My mother, Helen, once again tried to defend her. "She's just going through a tough time. We need to be patient," she said, her voice trying to hide her worry and exhaustion. My father, Peter, stood on the sidelines, his eyes filled with worry, but he said nothing. He had always been the silent one, a shadow standing between the two sides, not knowing which side to take. Or maybe he was too tired to intervene. One afternoon recently, Dolores Finch, a friendly but gossipy neighbor, visited my house. She whispered to me about the youngest Brooks's troubles, mentioning Marissa's police detentions, the rumors of her excessive drinking, and the mistakes that were slowly dragging her down. I listened to these stories from afar on the phone, a sense of helplessness and heartache spreading through me. I called home, offering to help, but my offer was coldly rejected. "We can handle it ourselves," my mother said quickly, her voice firm. I understood that it was not just a refusal, but an insurmountable wall. One day, Marissa was pulled over by the local police for driving erratically. It was a minor infraction, the kind of thing that in any family would have been resolved peacefully. But for my mother, it was a moment to rekindle old favors, relationships she had built over the years to shield her daughter. Helen calls an acquaintance, recalls old favors, and asks for help to prevent serious consequences for Marissa. The story is told with awkwardness and secrets that do not want to be exposed. Late that night, I received an unexpected text message from my mother. "Do you know anyone in town who can help with Marissa's situation?" The message on my phone was a veiled cry for help, both shocking and opening me up to the possibility that something might change. Outside, the festive lights were still bright. The neighborhood seemed to be immersed in a thin layer of whispered stories, the pressure to present a perfect family to outsiders, even though inside there were conflicts and hidden pain. I was at a crossroads of worry, responsibility, and love. Marissa was slipping away from me, and I wondered what I could do to save my little sister before it was too late. It's hard to say no to your family, especially when you've spent your whole life trying to win their approval. I, Evelyn, have given up so much, sacrificed so much, only to feel like a ghost in the house I grew up in. But now, sitting in my small apartment, the sound of the night rain gently tapping on the window, I know it's time to redraw my boundaries. The phone rang, and the screen showed my mother's name, Helen. Her voice came through the speaker, full of pleading and pressure. "Evelyn, you can use your connections to help." "Marissa? You know there's nothing more I can do. You're the only one who can save her." I listened and calmly replied, "Mom, I can't intervene this time. I've tried to help so many times, but every time I've only received cold treatment. This time, I have to live for myself." Helen's answer made me so angry that her voice echoed through the phone, but I had turned off the microphone. I felt a sense of relief, even though I knew this decision would cause a stir. Valerie, my ever-understanding companion, sat beside me, placing a warm hand on my shoulder. She gently advised, "Evelyn, no one can fix everything. Sometimes we have to let others take responsibility for our lives." The words echoed in my mind. I am not the one who bears all the pain. I need to keep my peace. The next day, I got a long email from my mother, words filled with guilt and despair. But I didn't reply. Sometimes silence is the clearest answer. That evening, Valerie brought me a bowl of hot soup. We sat together, sharing a quiet comfort, without words. Family is not just blood, but also the people who choose to accompany you. Valerie looked at me with worried eyes and asked, "Are you sure you're okay with this?" I looked up at the ceiling, sighing. The uncertainty was still there, but inside me was a steadfast determination. This time I would live for myself. Sometimes, it just takes a phone call in the middle of the night to wake you up and realize that the past has never really left you. I still remember that feeling when the phone rang loudly in my small apartment at 2 in the morning. The rain outside the window covered the city lights in a hazy veil, making the space quiet and lonely beyond description. I shivered and woke up, my hand shaking as I picked up the lit phone. It was my mother, Helen, calling. Her voice was broken with panic, mixed with fear and desperation. "Evelyn, Marissa's been arrested. She's driving drunk. We need you." The next ring was from my father, Peter, the first time I heard his voice weak, almost sobbing. This was not my usual father, the quiet, distant man, but a father imprisoned by fear for his daughter's future. I felt like my heart was being squeezed. The pain from the past still wouldn't let us go, and this time it was stronger than ever. The frantic calls, the screaming voices on the phone made it impossible for me to keep calm. In the meantime, a text message came from Aunt Shirley. "Be strong, Evelyn. Do what you feel is right." My aunt, who had always been my rock, sent me simple but powerful words of encouragement. Valerie was there to comfort me and help me investigate the case. She reminded me that the local media, especially reporter Gwen Carter, would likely pay attention to the story. That attention was both an opportunity for me to speak out, but also a huge challenge when private stories were exposed to the public. The crisis escalated rapidly as news outlets began reporting on Marissa's arrest, bringing my relationship with my sister to the forefront of online headlines for the first time. The sense of being exposed, of being judged, weighed heavily on me once again. That night, when everyone was fast asleep, I stood in front of the mirror in the small bathroom. My face was tired and marked by sleepless nights. I asked myself what I owed my family, and more importantly, what I owed myself. The sound of the rain outside mixed with the beat of my chest, and in that moment, I realized that my journey to find myself had only just begun. Strong coffee in a cup beside me, I scrolled through news feeds, social media comments. Loneliness, an old friend, an uninvited friend, was always there for me in times like these. But I knew I couldn't stop. For myself, for my unfulfilled dreams, and for Marissa herself, my sister lost in the darkness. I never thought I would sit in a courtroom and feel more like an outsider than I ever have. That feeling was overwhelming as I walked into the downtown Raleigh courthouse on an overcast morning, the gray sky foreshadowing a long, stressful day. Memories of my childhood flooded back, the invisible feeling of standing in the shadows of our home, forgotten by our family. Now, those feelings came back vividly as I walked into court to watch my sister, Marissa, face the inevitable consequences. Outside, the local media gathered in large numbers, reporters jostling for angles, the din of cameras, loudspeakers, and constant whispering creating chaos. Gwen Carter, a reporter whose name I had heard before, was the first to notice me. Immediately, the whispers spread through the crowd, like a small wave beginning to spread. As we entered the courtroom, all eyes turned to me, the last person anyone expected to see in a trial like this. Marissa, who was sitting nearby, avoided my gaze, her face a mess of embarrassment. My mother, Helen, looked more anxious and exhausted than ever, her face battling with conflicting emotions. Judge Alan Ramsey was the first to notice me. The atmosphere in the room suddenly changed, becoming more tense and oppressive. He was a middle-aged man, solemn and authoritative, having experienced many difficult cases, but this time is certainly a big challenge. My father, Peter, sat silently in the back of the room, wringing his hands. His eyes were conflicted, worried, helpless, and a little sad. Marcus Beasley, Marissa's defense attorney, tried to downplay the seriousness of the case. But from the quiver in his voice and the strain on his face, I could tell he was under a lot of pressure too. The hearing was halted when Judge Ramsey suddenly looked straight at me and asked, "Excuse me, are you Governor Brooks?" The question silenced the room so much that you could hear the clock ticking. I returned the gaze with the calm I had cultivated over the years. Every camera in the room was pointed at me, flashbulbs flashing as if to capture this moment. I was not a public figure, but now I was standing in the light and shadow of my family story. Outside the courtroom, the media frenzy continued, with reporters documenting my every move and every move the Brooks family made. Inside, the whispers of family members mingled with despair and hope, an unspeakable weight across generations. I stood there, eyes on me, feeling the weight of the past and the future that awaited me. I knew this was not just a trial about Marissa, but also a fight for me, to assert myself and seek justice for my family. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. This is a true story that I learned from my own experience. Looking back to my childhood, my voice was never taken seriously. I was the forgotten daughter, my voice like a passing wind, easily dismissed or ignored. But now, as I stood in the middle of the courtroom, my silence was more dominant than ever. The Raleigh courthouse was crowded in the middle of the morning, the air tense. The crowd outside was whispering, reporters were squinting at every detail, trying to get the latest news about the trial. Gwen Carter, camera and microphone in hand, stood ready to capture any moment. Judge Ramsey, normally stern and even-tempered, suddenly apologized for not recognizing me sooner. "I apologize for the delay in identification," he said in a calm voice, then adjourned the court for a private meeting. All eyes turned to me, the once shadowy figure in the family now the center of attention. My sister, Marissa, sat silently, her face filled with shame and worry. And my mother, Helen, clung to her denial, as if trying to hold on to some fragile shred of faith. Reporters around the area, especially those surrounding Valerie, asked questions and discussed animatedly. Valerie, my companion who had become my strong support, remained calm and steadfast. In the courtroom, I felt a fierce conflict within me. On the outside, I remained calm and composed, but inside, a wave of emotions was constantly surging. Judge Ramsey turned to me and asked if I would speak on my sister's behalf. I looked straight at him and said softly but firmly, "I'm just here as family. Nothing more." My silence says more than any words could ever express. It is empathy, tolerance, and deep pain that need not be spoken. As I stepped out of the courtroom to catch my breath, my mother whispered in the darkness, "Why didn't you save her?" The question was not just a reproach, but an echo of a past that had never been healed. I didn't have an answer at the time, but I understood that in this society, public image always comes first, while private struggles are often hidden or ignored. America's respect for public image is an invisible pressure. And I, Evelyn Brooks, am learning to deal with that pressure, step by step, on my journey to find myself and my family. Some choices you have to make yourself, even when everyone is staring, waiting for you to lean one way or another. I've been thinking about that quote all morning as I straddle the line between family and principle. The small courtroom held only a handful of people. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting pale yellow shadows on the dark wood. Outside, there were crowds, newspapers, whispers, and cameras. But inside, there was only truth, no stage, no audience, just people shedding their masks. Helen was the first to speak. She stood before me, her eyes red, her voice trembling in her throat. "Evelyn, you don't understand. Marissa needs you. The whole family needs you." She spoke as if I were a door she was knocking on, begging for it to open. I said nothing. I learned that it is not always necessary to speak up immediately. Silence, when maintained, can be a silent shield. Peter sat in the corner, staring out the window as if those gray brick buildings held the answers to what he dared not face. He did not side with me, nor did he side with my mother. He simply did not choose sides. Maybe that was what I feared most, neutrality disguised as love. Marissa sat across from him, her hands clasped together, her nails red and cracked from stress. For the first time in years, she looked more like a child than a family matriarch. "I messed up," she said, her voice a whisper on the wind. "I ruined everything." Judge Ramsey cleared his throat, his eyes turning toward me. "Miss Evelyn, as the guardian of the family and a prominent citizen, would you care to speak on behalf of your sister and plead for leniency?" I took a deep breath. I felt Valerie's advice echoing in my head: boundaries aren't selfish. They're a sign of self-protection. I replied, not shaking, not angry, but with a calmness that had taken me years to acquire. "I believe that justice should be served fairly. Marissa has a lawyer, a voice, and a chance to change if she really wants to. I'm not here to ask forgiveness on anyone's behalf. I'm just a sister." The air in the room fell as if everyone had held their breath at the same time. Helen turned away, unsuccessfully trying to hide her tears. You betrayed this family," she hissed, no longer the perfect woman in front of her neighbors, but a hopelessly disappointed mother. Judge Ramsey tapped the file. Preliminary hearing concluded. The case will be transferred to a higher court. No exceptions. No exceptions. Marissa slumped like a wet towel. Marcus Beasley, her attorney, silently filed papers, none of his earlier confidence. I stood up, picked up my bag, and headed for the door. Before I could put my hand on the handle, Helen's voice rang out behind me, painful, clear, without the need for a microphone to be heard by the whole room. "I am not your daughter anymore." The statement was heavy as lead, but not unexpected. It was confirmation of a long-simmering truth. I had stepped out of my family circle, not by protest, but by choice. Passing Valerie in the hallway, I nodded to her. She just looked at me, saying nothing, but her eyes said it all. Freedom can be lonely, but it's also the only thing that makes you truly alive. The story you want to hide is always the story everyone else wants to tell. The midday sun cast a warm yellow glow through the large glass windows of my office like a spotlight. But instead of shining a spotlight on an accomplishment, it reflected back the feeling of being observed and judged. I sat at my desk, my laptop open, a barrage of notifications from email, social media, national news, and things I no longer wanted to read. On the TV in the corner of the room, a line of text flashed across it. "Governor's sister in DUI scandal, family turmoil unfolds." Below is an analysis chart. Cold or upright? Valerie came in with 2 cups of hot coffee, setting them down on the table as if to pull me away from my corrosive thoughts. "Don't read the comments," she said, her voice both reassuring and matter-of-fact. "Public opinion changes faster than the weather in the South." I nodded slightly, but my eyes were. My eyes lingered on an online conversation where people were having heated discussions about loyalty, family, and personal boundaries. I saw my name appear as a public topic, a name that had been forgotten. The telephone rang. It was Mrs. Finch, an old neighbor, her voice hushed as if she were still standing behind the curtains. "Honey," she said, "the neighborhood is in an uproar. People see the television trucks parked." My alley last night. I smiled slightly, not out of satisfaction, but because it all felt familiar. The same neighborhood had been in the paper because Marissa had won an art prize, while my statewide science scholarship had been a small story on the bottom of page 6. That afternoon, Gwen Carter from the newsroom pulled the entire group of reporters into a brief press conference in my office. Her face lit up every time the camera flashed red. Valerie leaned in and whispered, "Gwen knows how to throw a bone for both sides to bite. Don't let her dictate your story." But I knew that if I didn't speak up, someone else would. Suddenly, I remembered the day, in the high school auditorium, when I received my award alone. Everyone quietly left their seats to watch Marissa perform in the small auditorium. I stood alone on the field. Stage, no applause, no flashbulbs pointed at me. At that moment, I told myself I would not let the silence make me disappear again. But today, silence was my choice. Until Gwen suddenly asked, "Do you regret not helping your sister?" The conference room fell silent, all eyes on me, cameras rolling as if in unison. I looked at her, feeling that all the answers were ready, just waiting for the right moment. And I said, "I only regret that she needed that help in the first place." The words were like a stone dropped into a still pond, causing countless ripples. Valerie looked at me, smiling without needing to say anything. She understood that I had just held something within myself. As we walked down the hallway, I heard the chatter behind us, questions, praise, and criticism mixed together. But there was no more fear. Back in my office, I opened the window to let in some fresh air. Outside, the city was still moving. Public opinion was still swirling, and strangers were still discussing a story I had once thought was mine. But in the corner of my desk, the last rays of the sun shone on an old photo, a photo of me alone in the hall accepting my award. I turned the frame to let the light in. Now, the light was no longer blinding or solitary. It was simply a reminder. True worth comes not from applause, but from being able to look at yourself without bowing. Some nights, the silence in your home is heavier than any accusation. The light from the street lamp outside the window fell on the wall, casting silent shadows on the ceiling of my small apartment. The clock jumped to 1:12 a.m., and there was nothing but the wind whistling through the old window, the city breathing evenly under the night blanket. I sat alone in the kitchen, my hands wrapped around a cup of cold tea, a white envelope in front of me with familiar slanted handwriting. Marissa. The letter had been there since morning, when a courier delivered it and said only one sentence, "For you personally." I knew I wasn't ready to read it in the daytime, in front of others, even in front of myself. But at night it was different. Night was when there was nowhere to hide. Before opening the letter, I pressed play on the voicemail. Helen left a long message, first tears, then harsh questions. "How could you do this to your own flesh and blood?" she said, her sobs turning to anger. "What did you get in return? A glowing article? A lonely career?" I did not reply. Not because I had no words, but because I was so used to answering in silence. A few minutes later, the phone rang. It was Dad. I hesitated and then picked up. "Evelyn," he began, hesitating as he always did. "I just want to say, I wish things were different." "Me too," I said, and then no one said anything else. The call ended the way so many things in my house ended, unfinished, just unfinished. Valerie called around too, just to check in. "You don't have to explain anything," she said. "You did the right thing. There are things other people will never understand, and they don't need to." I smiled slightly, grateful for her steadfastness. But even reassurance couldn't replace something I had to face myself. Finally, I opened the letter. Marissa's handwriting was no longer as soft as the birthday cards she used to write me as a child. It was sharp and quick, as if written in a storm of emotion. "Evelyn," the letter began, "I don't know where to begin. Maybe by saying I'm sorry. I've been a bad kid and, worse, a bad adult. I thought if I kept myself at the center, I'd never have to take responsibility. I thought you didn't care, but you were just tired of trying." I paused there, feeling a knot in my chest. For years, I had wished Marissa could see that. Not my perfection, my exhaustion. I drank more than I should have, drove when I shouldn't have, and hurt my family, she continued. But what broke me the most was when you refused to help me. Not because I was angry, but because for the first time, I understood how much you had been through. And I realized that if you forgive me too easily, I will never learn anything. I will face it. I am doing it. And if someday you are ready to meet me again, I will be there, a better version of myself." The last line was scrawled as if her hand was shaking. "Thank you for letting me face the truth on my own." I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer. No tearing, no forcing myself to feel anything I wasn't ready for. No dramatic music or tears, just a weighty silence. I looked around my apartment, a space I had built through sometimes lonely, but always honest decisions. The paintings on the walls were not rewards, they were choices. The little cactus on the windowsill had survived, despite my terrible care. Perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. Not everyone needs you to save them. Sometimes, they need you to step back so they can save themselves. I don't know if Marissa and I will ever be truly close again, or if my mother will ever see me as a whole person. But I do know that, in this moment, I am no longer the girl at the summer barbecue, trying to roast corn and find compliments. I am the woman sitting in her apartment, in the quiet enough to hear herself breathe. And as Aunt Shirley used to say, do what's right, not what's easy. I'm not sure what comes next, but I know I won't back down. I parked on the side of the maple-shaded street, breathing in the faint scent of rotting wood and wet grass of an early spring afternoon. The old Brooks house still stood, red brick faded, its porch sagging with weather and memory. A sign for SALE, the house creaked, the hinges creaked, a reminder that the place was officially no longer ours. Helen and Peter had just moved into a smaller apartment near the nursing home. This house became the book of the end. The real estate agent, Ms. Rowley, unlocked the door, and it swung open with the musty smell of abandoned rooms. As I entered, I heard a sigh, someone I didn't know, perhaps the time-hollowed wall itself, or perhaps mine. The living room was empty, the carpet rolled up, leaving only the pale impressions of furniture that had once been heavy with roots. Aunt Shirley walked beside him, tape and marker in hand, like a gentle master of a game of memory packing. "Keep what sparks joy, throw away the rest. Southern Marie Kondo, you know," she said softly. I chuckled. Peter had folded some cardboard boxes in the middle of the floor. Dad stood in the doorway, looking awkward. He wanted to help but was afraid of ruining my mood. He nodded, mumbled a hello, and then went into the back garden, where he used to fix the lawnmower every Sunday. Upstairs, my childhood room was empty. The wall where the NASA poster had hung was now covered in faded paint. On a high shelf, I pulled down a dusty shoebox, and inside was a faded blue ribbon, a 6th grade science award. I had shown off the ribbon back then, but it was quickly overshadowed by Marissa's dance trophy. I smoothed the crease, letting out a tiny sigh. There was also a hard-covered journal in the box, the cover of which read, "If no one believes in me, I will believe in myself." 11-year-old handwriting is crooked, but proud. Downstairs, Aunt Shirley cleared away the forgotten picture frames. She kept the one I had taken at graduation and put the rest in the donate back box. "Things have lives," she said, "but you. I don't owe them a ticket to continue." I nodded, appreciating her gentleness, a compass in the maze of memories. Peter came back in mid-session, handed me a canvas bag of old math books, and whispered, "Donate them if you don't need them." I looked at my dad. His hair was grayer, his eyes wetter than I remembered. I nodded, and we were both reluctant to hug, so we touched hands lightly. Every goodbye left a stinging sensation in my chest. Helen did not appear. She left a note on the cupboard door. "Take what you want, the rest is up to the broker." The handwriting was sharp, neither cold nor friendly, just neutral, as she protected herself from any disturbance. As the afternoon wore on, sunlight filtered through the empty window, casting long streaks of light across the hallway. I put the diary and ribbon in my tote bag, folded the old wool blanket, the only thing my mother had knitted for me in college. For the rest, I stuck a donate label on my bookcase and tossed the torn-eared teddy bear into the recycling bin. My heart tightened a little, but it also felt strangely loose, like unpacking before a new journey. On the porch, I turned the old key in my hand. The small iron hook was engraved with "Home Sweet Home" was gray. I walked to the sandpit beside the path, dropped the key, and pushed it under the damp soil with my foot. It disappeared in a crunch of gravel, a silent ritual of self-liberation. Late that night, in my own apartment, I took out a new wooden frame and placed the ribbon next to the inauguration photo. The two moments, one anonymous, one solemn, now stood side by side, equal. I hung the frame, stepped back, and watched the light bounce off the glass. Objects and homes help carve the outlines of memories, but they do not determine who we become. It is the letting go that opens the way for the next story. I made a cup of chrysanthemum tea and sat by the window. Outside, the city murmured its night breath. Inside, the old door had just closed, but the hallway ahead stretched out, surprisingly light and wide. I still remember the morning I received Marissa's second letter, a cream-colored envelope. No tears, no priority stamp, just the words "From Windgrove Recovery Center" slanted in the left corner. I was taken aback, not ready to touch her words, but I finally opened them, like someone lifting an old stone to see what stubborn sprouts were sprouting beneath. On her first morning at Windgrove, she said, a light drizzle fell, not enough to wash away the damp, antiseptic smell of the hallways. The conference room was a whitewashed wooden structure, a circle of chairs, a steaming coffee pot in the middle of the table. There was no background music, just the sound of someone clearing their throat and the tapping of a pencil. Never had a room felt so small and so spacious at the same time, Marissa wrote, because I had finally been forced to fill it with my own truth. The group is led by Carla, a woman with neatly tied gray hair whose voice is both medical advice and the sternness of someone who has lost her way. Marissa is flanked by Aaron, a former soldier, Janice, a restaurant chef, and Miguel, a muralist. Each. People share a broken story, alcohol, drugs, debt, all ending up on the same plastic chair, clutching a cup of coffee, drowsy. It was Marissa's turn to stand. Her fingers played with the paper wristband, the metal clicking softly. "I'm Marissa," she said, her voice shaking but not breaking. "I used to think I was the center of the universe. I was forgiven too quickly, protected for too long. And I drove drunk, willing to drag anyone down just so I wouldn't have to take responsibility. Now I'm here so I can stop hiding." No one applauded. No one sneered. Just the sound of Carla's pen scribbling, then a brief reply. "The past explains you, but it does not excuse you." The words fell to the wooden floor, silent but heavy as lead. On the third day, Helen stopped by. Marissa said her mother came in with a basket of fruit and a wet look in her eyes, as if trying to weave together some old, frayed string. But when Helen asked awkwardly if the room was comfortable, she simply said, "Mom, I need some space. This time, I need to make my own bed." Helen paused, nodded, placed the basket on the counter, and left. Marissa said that in that moment, her mother felt smaller than ever, but also for the first time she didn't have the armor to protect her. The last week of her first month of therapy, Marissa had to present her personal goals to the group. She stood up, her shoulders still thin but her chin prouder. "I am not my mother's favorite child, nor am I the long shadow of my sister who went before me and received all the judgment. I am just me, and that is enough for now." The statement made Aaron nod slightly, Janice squeeze his shoulder, and Carla smile rarely. The letter ended with a firm handwriting. "I have to face the truth myself. Thank you for letting me fall and also giving me the chance to stand up." I folded the letter and sat still for a long time. In that silence, I saw her former pride peeling away layer by layer, revealing a rough but honest side of her. I wasn't sure we could ever go back to being two kids running under the sprinkler in the summer. But at the moment I read the line, "I am just me, and that is enough," I realized that another door had just opened, not to the past, but to the unknown of the future. I put the letter in the drawer next to the blue ribbon of my childhood and felt something shift in my chest, like a piece of glass caught in the sunlight, tilted and suddenly revealed in a myriad of colors. Perhaps forgiveness is not a gesture, but a process, a slow process of accepting that we are all rebuilding our lives from the most honest place, rock bottom. It's not easy to start over, but sometimes rock bottom is the only honest ground on which to build a new life. I opened the pale yellow envelope one quiet morning, when the city was still asleep and the coffee on the table had not yet steamed. Marissa's familiar slanted handwriting was spread across the first line. "Evelyn, if you have 5 minutes, I would like to leave my story here." I sat down, let my heart calm, and began to read. What she told me takes me back to another morning in the humble conference room of the Windgrove Community Recovery Center, where she hit rock bottom and laid the first brick on a new path. The group room, Marissa wrote, was about the size of our old classroom, with stained cream walls and a circle of plastic chairs. A coffee pot steamed on a rickety wooden table. The weak aroma of Arabica mingled with the pungent smell of disinfectant. The instructor, Carla, was a woman with neatly tied white hair and a deep but warm voice, who began by saying, "The past explains you, but it does not excuse you." Each member was expected to stand up, say their names, and face their own truths without hiding behind medals or excuses. Marissa said, "When it was my turn, my hands were shaking with longing for a shield. All my life, I had been privileged to choose that shield, my mother's smile, her cuteness, or simply her protection. That day, there was nothing left to shield me. I stood up, hearing the plastic of the chair creak. My name is Marissa," she said. "I drove drunk more than once. I used to think the police and the law were someone else's problem. I hurt my family, and I kept hoping someone would clean up the mess. Today, I'm here because no one wants to cover for me anymore, and I'm grateful for that." No one applauded, nor did anyone smack their lips in contempt. They listened, as if they were looking at themselves in a mirror. During the break, the coffee pot ran out, and everyone stood around the kettle exchanging pleasantries. Aaron, a former Marine, nodded and said I was brave enough to be honest. Janice, a restaurant chef who had just lost her license, put a packet of sugar substitute in my hand, joking, "It's already bitter. Add a little sweetness to make it easier to swallow." These small gestures made me feel unconditional equality for the first time. 2 weeks later, Helen came to visit. She walked into the waiting room with a red tie-wrapped fruit basket, her eyes starting to see where her daughter slept and what she ate. Marissa described the moment in 3 words, warm and cold. Helen asked the manager about the meal, asked the doctor about the treatment, asked her daughter if she was cold. After listening, she took a deep breath and replied, "Mom, I need to do this homework by myself. Please let me stay, even if I stumble." Helen was stunned, put the fruit basket on the table, and nodded slightly. Perhaps for the first time, she understood that the love that kept her standing was not an umbrella to protect her from the rain, but a pair of shoes that helped her walk across puddles. At the end of the month, each person had to state their personal goals. Marissa stood up, her back straight, her voice loud enough to carry. "I am no longer my mother's favorite child, nor the shadow of my sister, who used to carry all the whispers for me. I am just me, and that is enough for me. Now." Carla smiled and made a dark blue check mark in her notebook. Marissa wrote that in that moment, she felt neither shame nor pride, only lightness, the lightness of returning a pebble from your pocket without realizing how heavy it had been for years. I folded the letter, the early morning light streaming through the window catching the trembling edges. Something in my chest shifted, not explosively, just smoldering like a fire beneath the ashes, warm enough to be felt. I had thought forgiveness was a single verb. It turned out to be a long process, requiring growth for both the sender and the receiver. I put the letter in the drawer and did not reply. Not because I was hesitant, but because I wanted to let your new flow settle. Sometimes silence is also a blessing. Go on, I am here. Outside on the balcony, the early sound of car horns signaled the city was starting to move. I picked up my still warm cup of coffee and thought to myself, sometimes rock bottom is the strongest foundation, the place where the seemingly weakest people end up building the strongest home for themselves. And I smiled, imagining Marissa laying the first brick with hands that had stopped shaking. Night had fallen quietly, casting a thin layer of moonlight across my windowsill. The kitchen lights were off, leaving only the living room with a soft glow from a floor lamp and a small fire in the electric fireplace. I sat in a linen armchair, a soft pillow under my arm, and in my other hand I held Marissa's letter. The paper had been folded countless times, as if it were breathing with me. When I reached the line, "I am just me, and that is enough," I smiled, a warm feeling creeping up to the corners of my eyes. On the mantelpiece, a friend giving photo of me with my chosen family, Valerie beaming, Mrs. Finch raising a glass of sweet tea, and Shirley tilting her head and winking, stands next to a small wooden frame holding a faded blue science ribbon. Two memories more than 2 decades apart now sit quietly side by side, reminding me that the journey to fulfillment is not measured by the length of my accomplishments, but by the ability to put the past and the present side by side without envy. There was a soft knock on the door. Valerie poked her head in, her coat streaked with rain. "Bringing back chamomile tea and gingerbread cookies," she said, handing over a wooden tray and kicking off her shoes. She set the tray on the table, the cookies smelling of cinnamon. I poured 2 cups of tea, the steam blurring her glasses. "It's so humid this time of year," Valerie murmured, her eyes warm. We clinked cups, sitting quietly for a few seconds listening to the crackling of the coals. No words were needed. Sometimes friendship was just sharing a safe silence after a long storm. The phone rang with a video call. The screen showed Aunt Shirley, her new kitchen with its bright red geraniums in the background. "What are you 2 girls talking about up late?" she asked, her voice tinged with mischief. I told her about the new letter, about our late dinner. She laughed. There are many styles of families. It's important to know which one to keep to yourself. Before hanging up, she told me that my dad was trying out pottery classes at the new community center, and my mom, she paused, was learning to listen quietly. I nodded, thanked her, and promised to come down when my schedule was free. Before I could put the phone down, the doorbell rang a second time. Mrs. Finch stood there, holding a box of pecan pie, the scent of butter and sugar lurking in her wool coat. "It's cold. It's hot," she said. "Don't let it get cold." I took the pie, thanked her. She winked and said she wouldn't. Bothered, just saw the light was still on, so conveniently stopped by. As the door closed, I heard the clacking of her slippers fade down the hallway, the familiar sound of neighborly love that still kept me grounded whenever my feet felt wobbly. On the coffee table, the phone lit up. A text message from a strange but familiar number. "Helen, I hope you are well." There were no more flowery words. Those 3 little words came from the woman who once thought apologies were a sign of weakness. I typed back, "I'm fine. Good night, Mom." No more questions, no more blame. I put the phone aside, leaned back in my chair, and felt the ticking of the wall clock blend into my heartbeat like a slow, soothing soundtrack. Forgiveness, after all, sometimes boils down to a blessing and letting go of the old lifebuoy. Valerie pushed the plate of gingerbread toward me. "What do you think we should add to the shelf tomorrow?" she asked, deliberately changing the subject. I looked around. The friend-giving frame, the ribbon, The baby photo of me standing next to the paper rocket, the streetscape I bought at the weekend market. Maybe I'll hang up some of Marissa's postcards when she sends them, I said. She nodded. It'll take time, no rush. We ate the cookies, our tea cooling, and our hearts warming. It was late, and Valerie said goodbye. I walked her to the door, the night wind blowing a cold strand of hair against my cheek. As I locked the door, I realized that in this silence there was no weight of accusation, only the space I had chosen, the people I trusted, the memories I kept. Returning to my chair, I opened my diary. The last page was blank like a window waiting for the morning light. In a calm handwriting, I wrote, "Sometimes you don't get the family you dreamed of as a child, but you can always build the peace you deserve. Peace doesn't come from the applause of a crowd. It comes when you look in the mirror and don't bow your head. Tonight, I'm going home, not because of the address, but because my heart has stopped wandering." I put down my pen and closed my notebook. The fireplace was only embers. I didn't add more wood. Peace, in its turn, needed the darkness to smolder. I turned off the light, letting the moonlight illuminate the silver ribbon and the friend-giving photo, listening to the city outside, still buzzing, and me, inside, finally home. Hello, friend. I am the narrator who has accompanied you through the past 16 chapters. As I typed these last lines, I suddenly realized that the deepest point of the Evelyn, Marissa's story is not in the noisy moments of the court or the hurried midnight bell, but in the final silence. The moment when each character faces the inner mirror and says to themselves, "I am good enough," even if no one says so. What moved me most was the journey of turning weakness into foundation. Marissa's rock bottom, the Brooks family's fracture, Evelyn's loneliness, all became the building blocks for a new peaceful home. It turns out that letting go is not a loss. It's making room for something healthier to grow. And forgiveness, sometimes, begins with power or not intervene, let the other person take responsibility, stand up for himself. What about you? Have you ever felt lost in your own home, or had to sow seeds of hope in a seemingly barren land? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Maybe your story will help someone else who is struggling to find a way out. If this ending evokes any fond memories or wow moments for you, please type no.1 and let me know where you're listening from. Small numbers will connect us into a warm circle. Do you love simple, lighthearted stories that contain profound lessons? Don't forget to click register channel so you don't miss the next journey, because who knows, the character in the next video might be your shadow one day you haven't had time to call out. Thank you for patiently going through all 16 chapters, for letting my words visit a quiet corner in your heart. I hope that whenever you are insecure, you will remember, peace is not a reward given by others, but a gift we wrap ourselves with courage, honesty, and a little gentleness for ourselves. See you in the next story, where we continue to learn how to build a peaceful home, even when life still shakes with strong winds from time to time.